This is a true story, which took place in Minnesota in 2019. In a PTA meeting gone awry, members of the board fight like animals. A woman named Dot, who is with her daughter, Scotty, tries to escape. One of the teachers touches Dot out of anger, but she shocks him with her taser. A police officer comes to stop her, but she also tases him out of shock. Other police officers soon come to cart her away. In the back seat of the car of a police officer named Indira, Dot explains to Indira that she was simply trying to defend herself and didn't see the officer, but Indira doesn't buy it. Moments later, Dot gets taken to the cell, where she's given a mugshot and has her prints taken, which worries her. That evening, Dot's husband, Wayne, comes to bail her out. While they head home, he tells her he told his mom about her problem, but Dot doesn't like how he tells his mom about everything. On Christmas Day, the entire family gathers at Wayne's mother's home. Wayne's mom, Lorraine, comes out with a lot of pride and glamour. She sarcastically asks where her granddaughter is because Scotty is not wearing a dress. She quickly orders everyone around to stand in front of the Christmas tree for a picture with guns to project strength. During dinner, Lorraine brings up the topic of Dot's arrest to the Attorney General, who happens to be at the table too. Lorraine asks what Dot was doing at the PTA meeting, so Dot tells her they were there to raise money for the school library. But Lorraine rudely asks why they don't just donate money like normal people. That night, Dot tries to go to sleep but recalls the face of a strange man who lives on a ranch. The next morning, Wayne takes Scotty to school. Dot sits down to watch her favorite show while doing some knitting. While she's knitting, she is shocked by the sight of a man wearing a mask who approaches their glass door. When the man steps in, Dot is nowhere to be found, but he finds her knitting line going up the stairs. As he follows the knitting line, his accomplice, Donald, steps in and complains about how hot the mask is making him feel. The guy named Ole, who seems to be the boss, signals to Donald, and they both go upstairs. They check the entire room but don't find her. Eventually, Donald detects Dot in the toilet and opens the door. Dot immediately comes out with an ignited spray can and burns his face. She uses it to derail Ole and runs out of the room. She somehow stumbles on her way and falls down the stairs. Ole comes to touch the seemingly unconscious Dot, but she cuts his face with ice skates and tries to run. Donald, who has a big burn scar, corners her and tells her they were hired to bring her back alive, but they have the liberty to take out her teeth, so Dot stops fighting. That afternoon, Wayne gets home and tells Scotty to stay in the car. He goes through the house and finds blood, so he calls the police. Indira arrives at the scene and gathers some evidence before the forensic team arrives. That evening, Wayne meets with his mother and her lawyer, Danish, who both assume this is a kidnapping case. They suppose that the kidnappers did this to get a ransom from Lorraine, but Lorraine wonders why the kidnappers think she'll break her bank person's wife that he knocked up. Wayne solemnly reminds her that she's his wife, but she tells him to stop crying because he's at the grown-up table. Lorraine decides not to bring in the FBI, but to hire a private investigation team so she can keep things quiet. Meanwhile, Indira gets home and finds a lot of mail about debts she needs to pay. She goes to speak to her husband about her case and suggests that he go back to his former job, but he tells her he's practicing to become a professional golfer, and he's close. Miles away, Dot is in the back seat of her captor's vehicle. Donald tries to tend to his burns, which seem to be getting worse. While they're driving, a police car stops them from behind, and they realize that Donald disobeyed Ole's instructions by stealing the truck they're driving from a random place. Ole stops the car and tells Dot to stay still, but she immediately runs out, past the police, who ask her if she's okay. The two assailants immediately open fire on the police officers and take one out. The other officer, Witt, hides behind the car and radios for help. He runs into the fields to evade pursuit and finds a store, which Dot happens to already be in. Dot intently looks through the store's goods to see what she can make out of them. Meanwhile, Witt is shot in the foot, so he runs into the store since the enemies have superior firepower. Witt goes to help Dot untie herself, so she tells him to fix his leg while she checks the back door. While she goes, she spills some oily material in front of the front door and grabs some bags of ice to go check the back. When she gets there, she finds Donald, who had injured himself after breaking in through a bathroom window. Still trying to arm himself, Witt asks the attendant if they have a gun, but the attendant tells him they only have an air horn. Suddenly, Ole breaks through the front door, and both men start to exchange gunshots. The sound startles Donald, who slowly steps out of the bathroom stall, only to be hit in the face by Dot with a bag of ice. The impact sends him headlong onto a toilet seat, breaking his head, so Dot quickly goes to take his gun. Meanwhile, the clack startles Ole with the air horn, but Ole quickly pokes him full of bullets. The distraction allows Witt to get a good shot at Ole, but Ole quickly jumps to the ground. Ole uses a mirror to try to see Witt while still taking cover, which gives Dot enough of a distraction to whip him in the head with a metal object while he's not looking. Dot grabs his gun, but hears Witt complain about his loss of blood. She quickly rushes to tend to his wounds, and Witt is surprised by the things she knows how to do. Dot rushes back to check on Ole, but finds out that his escape. When Witt hears the sirens from the approaching police cars, he gets up and tells Dot to stand behind him so they don't attack her. He jokes about how she's going to get a medal, but but he soon notices that she's nowhere to be found. At the house, Wayne puts Scotty in bed and promises that they'll get Dot back. He soon falls asleep on the sitting room chair after thinking for a while. The sound of an intruder in the house soon wakes him up from sleep, so he grabs a bell to attack the intruder. He follows the bloody footprints, only to find Dot making a pancake breakfast for Scotty. He asks her what happened and mentions the blood and hair they found in the house. She tells him he's being ridiculous, and she just cut herself. She tells him the arrest got to her, so she went somewhere to clear her head. She gives some more excuse for the blood and mask and tells him to stop saying she was abducted when he insists on what the police said. Wayne keeps quiet, so she asks him to help her set the table for Scotty's breakfast. In a nearby county, Roy, the man that Dot saw in her dreams, appears on a horse. He explains how he's been sheriff of this county since he was 25. He explains that his father and grandfather were also sheriffs. He explains that the husband is the head of his household, and the woman abides under him, holding her virtue close until the matrimonial threshold is crossed. In a diner, he explains to a couple that, in exchange, a man protects his female as his sword. He tells the husband that a man only raises his hand to his wife when she forgets her place and acts like the man. So, he does it only for instructions and mustn't take pleasure in it. He points out that in this case, he, referring to the husband, simply beats his wife regularly. The woman tries to say she fell, but the man tells her to keep quiet. So Roy tells a nearby enforcer to choke the husband from behind while he comforts the wife. He gives the wife some money to fix a meal before he roughs up the husband a bit more, promising to come by the next morning to see if he has learned his lesson. As they leave, Roy's son, Gator, who also works as a law enforcer, comes to tell him that Ole didn't capture Dot. In a shed, Ole explains that Roy didn't give him the full information about Dot's prowess and had just described her as a housewife. Ole explains that he would have brought more men and given a larger price if he had explained better. Ole asks why Roy wants the woman, so Roy explains that she's his wife and she left him. Roy explains that she hid from him for 10 years, and he finally found her when he saw her fingerprints in the system, so he wants to collect his debt. Roy tells Ole to follow Gator to get his payment, and Ole thanks him. As Gator follows Ole from behind, Ole detects some men with guns nearby, so he picks up a cigarette on the ground as he's led away. Gator leads him towards the two men and cocks his gun behind him, but Ole tosses the cigarette at him, catching Gator by surprise, giving Ole enough time to disarm him and use him as a human shield to shoot the rest of the men. Roy hears the gunshot and rushes there with his gun to find Gator choking with a broken arm and Ole nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Indira comes to see Dot, and she tells Indira that she only had a bad day. Indira explains that the blood and hair they found aren't hers, but Dot says the hospital could have made mistakes, and she bought the hair. When the air becomes tense, Wayne breaks the ice by saying it's his fault for panicking, and he's only happy that Dot is home. Wayne offers to drop the charges, but Indira tells them that's not how it works. Wayne tells her that Danish, his mom's lawyer, is now their lawyer, and she can speak to him for further inquiries. In Lorraine's office, Danish tells her that Dot is back, and she claims she wasn't abducted. Lorraine smells a rat and feels Dot may have kidnapped herself to extort her, but later got cold feet. Danish mentions how Dot's past records are too clean too, so they both decide they need to investigate this before the police start digging around, and this causes a scene for her office. At his house, Roy does some skinny dipping in his jacuzzi. Gator comes to give him some information about Dot's new life and family. While they talk, two new FBI agents come to meet him about the fact that he's not enforcing any of the United States laws, which include gun and drug laws, in his county. Roy tells them he's the law of the land, and he was elected with the responsibility of interpreting the Constitution given to them by God. While they talk, Roy steps out naked and wraps a towel around himself. When they suggest that his practices are illegal, he tells them that the law has little to do with what is wrong and right. At Wayne's home, Dot comes back home with Scotty and finds Lorraine in her house. Lorraine mentions her kidnapping, but Dot tells her she only had a tantrum that blew out of proportion. Lorraine tells Dot she thinks she either has a screw loose or someone kidnapped her, and she's lying about it. Dot says even though she has a screw loose, she's a good wife and her husband loves her. Lorraine tells her she doesn't trust her and suggests to Dot that she leave and go back to where she came from. Out of nowhere, Dot reduces her voice and loses the Minnesota accent. She calls Lorraine the B word and tells her she's gone to levels of hell to get where she is, and she's going to have to sleep with both eyes open to take what is hers and live. After saying that, Dot switches back to her Minnesota accent and asks her if she's going to like to have dinner on Sunday. Lorraine, who is shocked, immediately takes her leave. That night, Dot looks at a scar behind her back and recalls Roy. Soon after, Dot goes downstairs to work on building protection systems for the home with Scotty. She puts naked electric wires by the windows in case there's a break-in, puts broken glass everywhere, and hangs a sledgehammer at the front door. Meanwhile, Danish goes to see Wayne at his workplace. Danish calls Lorraine so they can all have a chat. Lorraine and Danish talk about how the police discovered the same blood in the house that matches one at the crime scene at a convenience store. Lorraine concludes that whatever Dot is pulling is going to end with her having to lose money, and Wayne tells her that not everything is about money. Lorraine tells Danish to slap Wayne since she's not here to give it to him. Danish hesitates, but eventually slaps Wayne. In a hospital, Indira comes to see Witt. Indira informs him that she thinks she has the identity of the mystery woman who helped him and goes through her phone to show him a picture. Gator steps in and introduces himself to them as a sheriff's deputy. While they talk, Gator grabs Indira's phone to check the picture and intentionally deletes the picture, pretending to have accidentally deleted it. Gator soon steps out to meet another sheriff deputy so they can go look for Dot. At night, Wayne returns home and finds his home full of dangerous contraptions. When he asks Dot, she tells him she's setting up a makeshift protection system. He informs her that Lorraine is taking legal action against her because she thinks she's a con woman working with the kidnappers. Wayne tells her that the entire story doesn't make sense, and it makes less sense that she's creating a weird security system. Dot reminds him about the fight at the PTA meeting and tells him they need to protect themselves. Wayne suggests that they get a gun, which makes Dot happy. Dot tells him she knows things are hard, but they can work through it. They all go to have dinner. Meanwhile, Gator and the other deputies stop at a filling station while on their way to Dot's house. Gator steps into the store while the deputy fills the tank. Out of nowhere, Ole ambushes the deputy and kills him. Gator returns to the car and waits for the other man, but rushes out when he spots his dead body in the rearview mirror. When he steps out, he finds a note on the deputy's body that says, "You owe me." Wow, what a roller coaster of a TV show. This was just the first 2 episodes and the ride is wild. Would you like us to cover more?
Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like. It really helps the channel.